Whew. Okay.
Right. We got our backup. We're all good.
We got the backup, yeah. Although, it'll be Zoom audio. Whatever. It's cool. How you doing?
I'm all right. Busy
cool.
week.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, it's a bunch of busy weeks. I'm hosting that jam again. Dude, I had a crazy conversation last night, though. And I don't know, we could bring it into the thing. I was at an open jam. Or I was at a jam here here in Bleep.
I haven't been bleeped. I mean,
it'd be great if you bleeped everything. Like, I was at a bleep in Bleep.
Yeah. You go early enough, though, and, like, we say it, and it's not unbelievable. But anyway, that'll just be funny.
Unbleepable. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I was talking with this bass player, and I don't even know how we got here, but he's in real estate for his day job. And then he's a Pentecostal Christian. And then we were talking scripture, and then he was like praying over me, and it's just like, it got wild.
How did it go from that to just...
Well, I started pressing him on some ideas because... But I'm also interested. Like, I wasn't trying to convince him of anything. I was mostly trying to see where his theology went. Because I work at a Methodist church, so I hear the Methodists all the time, and I don't talk to many Pentecostals. So I'm sort of interested in where their theology goes with the whole thing.
Isn't that what Sam Kinison was before he became a comedian? He was a Pentecostal preacher.
Yeah.
I think it's like the fire and brimstone stuff.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. There's fire and brimstone stuff. So the I think it's the gifts of the Pentecost is really where it comes from. So the idea is that if you have faith in Jesus, you have all the gifts. Like, you are indistinguishable from Jesus. You can do all the stuff that Jesus does. So you can raise people from the dead. You can turn water into wine.
Interesting.
So if you can't do those things, that means that you don't have enough faith.
So does everybody not have enough faith?
Yes. Yeah. Basically. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, like, you are healed. That was the craziest thing. Is like, he was talking about how he was having heart problems and he couldn't walk long distances, and the doctors were telling him to rest, but his pastor was saying, no, like, that's all wrong. What you need to do is just walk, but while you're walking, praise and thank Jesus with every step. And if you get too tired and you need a rest, that means that you're not walking with enough faith. Because you are healed. Interesting.
And how long ago was this?
I don't know.
Like, how long has he been doing it, I wonder?
I mean, I don't know. Because he has some story. There's this one story, and I don't know. It's a little disrespectful. I don't know. A lot of certain types of Christians like to say that they were atheists for a long time, and it's like, I don't believe that story at all.
Yeah.
And kind of what they mean by that, like they're in some stupid legal technicality, is they mean like they weren't baptized until they were in their 20s, and so like...
You're coming right out of the gate.
Sorry.
It's okay.
It was a wild conversation. Yeah. It was a crazy conversation.
Yeah. So how long did you let him pray over you?
I don't know. That's how he ended. He was like, "Would you mind if I prayed over you? Would that embarrass you too much?" And I was like, "You pray if you want."
Yeah, that's nice. Well, that's nice. I mean, the thing is, he obviously means well, right?
Yeah, he means well. Yeah.
until he starts telling you you're going to hell.
It's this funny thing though, because I feel like I'm the devil when I have conversations like this.
I know. Yeah. Well, I mean...
I sort of enjoy that in a perverse way. Like, getting into our conversation of madness today, I like it because the whole time he's talking about how the force of the devil is the force of the intellect. And so if you read the Bible from an intellectual perspective, that's what the devil does, because the devil knows Scripture better than anybody. The devil knows Scripture extremely well, and the devil is, like, very intellectually savvy with the Scripture. And that is not what a good, faithful Christian does. A good, faithful Christian feels the Scripture and engages with it on a spiritual level, but is not intellectually dissecting it.
Yeah, no, so I will say, so we're talking about Foucault, right?
Yeah,
Madness and Civilization. And I had my trepidations, but man, I've actually very much enjoyed it. It's very difficult to read, but...
It's hard.
This is like hitting on the exact metaphysics that I like, so...
It's so colorful,
good.
right?
Yeah. I mean, yes, maybe too colorful sometime, but
right, it's so colorful that it's hard to understand what he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know if you saw. I did an Instagram story post about some of my thoughts about this, and I was just reading his Wikipedia, and I didn't realize this was actually his thesis. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I didn't know that until you posted it. But
yeah, I mean, but it sort of makes sense now reading about it, because it's like there is a little bit of like, and so I started also reading his like Birth of the Clinic.
Cool.
It inspired me to go get a bunch of his other ones, so I'm going to work my way through his stuff. And just even from the get-go, I felt like he was much more coherent in Birth of a Clinic. Like,
right.
And don't get me wrong, I mean, part of it also is, I think, just the fact that he has all of these super obscure references that I just have never heard of. And then he sort of like doesn't like really introduce them. He just like says the first name of the person, and I'm like, who are we talking about right now?
It's like the Dennis Miller of postmodernism.
Dude, yeah, a little bit. Wow, yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah. But I mean, it was very interesting because, I mean, he has like, you can tell he knows history, and so it makes sense. I guess he studied history and philosophy, but he sort of had a hard time getting his thesis published. I'm just reading about his Wikipedia, and he was like in Sweden for 5 years before this Swedish historian trying to get his thesis defended there, and they kind of were like, this sucks. And then he went to Poland for a little bit, and then I think he finally got it done in Germany or something. Or maybe Poland, I don't remember. But yeah, I mean, I can sort of see how he would have a hard time getting a committee to approve this, just from the coherence of it. And I mean this respectfully. Obviously, the guy's done a lot and has had a huge impact. So it's like, who am I to offer critiques in some sense?
It's interesting actually, because when I was in grad school, since I was in music, we engaged in postmodernism a lot, more directly probably than you do.
Definitely.
Your program.
We don't at all, really.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. But I remember that we had a guest speaker who was specifically aligned with the postmodernist school. She called herself a postmodernist. And I remember sitting there, and her talk, I didn't even understand it.
Oh, you talked about this. It's like the jargon.
I literally didn't understand the sentences she was saying.
Yeah.
But that was very strange.
Don't you think that was a little bit different than what's going on with Foucault? Or I don't know, maybe not.
I think it's in line. I think actually what happened after Foucault, in my understanding, and not being a postmodernist scholar, is that sort of those flights of fancy that he goes on, where it just gets really, really colorful, is what sort of everything becomes. And sort of the writing of postmodernism is almost like poetry or something weird.
Right. I did get that, like, and yeah, I mean, and this is especially as somebody that's basically done scientific writing for most of my career. Right. I mean, it was a little bit frustrating in that sense, because I was like, dude, we do not need all of this.
Well, I feel like it's engaging with the tradition of history in a slightly different way. Because if you think about like the Greek epics and things like that, those are in verse. Those are songs, essentially. They're poems. And so I think that I got
the Iliad resting on the microphone right now.
Nice.
or the other way around, the microphone rest with
Okay.
Sorry.
But yeah, so I think it's also engaging with that aspect of history, because I remember learning this in a class, like an ancient history class, where they were talking about how those Greek epics actually were history, and Greek historians at the time also wrote in verse and would write in metaphor and things like that.
Right.
And our idea today is a very modern idea that history is like the facts and dates and things like that.
Well, and also I just felt like the reason that it was like that is before you write stuff down, the way you remembered stuff is through verse. I mean, you can remember songs much more easily because of the rhyming scheme and the rhythm and stuff. Right. So I always thought that was more of a function of that.
Sure.
I'm not, so it's all that idea of like, yes, it's great. Yeah, my hair is... This is why I hate the cameras. Just looking at myself. I need to put something over my face.
This is over your face.
Yeah. I don't need to be looking at myself. Yeah, there we go. Oh, wait, sorry. I didn't mean to cover up the, Okay, so, I'm crazy, you know this. Yeah, no, but I don't know. I see that point, but there,
Right.
and honestly, again, it's like I said, I actually enjoyed reading it, even though it was frustrating to read.
Right.
And I see that there is benefit to doing it this way, and I'm all for sort of making art out of. I mean, it's basically trying to be artistic, obviously,
Right.
with history, which is kind of cool and stuff like that. But did make it hard to read. And I do feel like again, I haven't read a lot of his later stuff yet, so for all I know,
Right.
I could be completely wrong here. But it felt like he was starting to become a little bit more coherent
Right.
as his career. But
He becomes an old man. He becomes boring.
Well, and that's all of us, right? God knows it's me.
Right.
Yeah, no, but anyway, but yeah, no, I have enjoyed it a lot. But yeah, I mean, even just trying to understand what is his point here. I mean, so I guess, and
Yeah. So how could we sum up the chapter? It's kind of long.
I feel like to sum it up is that before the 15th century, the medieval way that we viewed madness was as well, first off, we didn't try to sequester him away from society and put him in. I mean, he was also making a point that the leper colony was like the precursor to the asylum.
Yeah. Right.
And so we didn't sequester them away from society. We sort of thought that there was some wisdom in their, I guess, ability. Even though they weren't communicating in the way that we communicate, they were still communicating some kind of truth.
Right.
And then after, sort of starting in the 14th / he says the 15th century and onward into the sort of classical era and Renaissance, then it became, we became reason. We basically reasoned our way out of it, and trying to define basically everything in a reductionist setting of this is what madness is, and then sequestering him away and silencing him. He had a big motif about silence and how, they've now become sort of the wisdom that they have, we sort of silenced them, and we only communicate with them through doctors. I thought that was also kind of interesting. It's like we're not communicating with them as much directly. Right. And so, it's more of just not, I guess, he was trying to say that we're not appreciating the wisdom that they have, essentially. Yeah. But I don't know. You probably have a better take on it.
I mean, I don't know if I have a better take. I'm not sure that I see so much prescription in this first chapter. I see it kind of as laying out the history of the conception of madness. And so it starts with the idea of the leper colony and the shift from the leper colony to the insane asylum idea. And I think the idea of sequestering, in a sense, was there the whole time, because they talk about
the ship of fools.
Exactly, and right. The I was reading a little bit about the ship of fools. That's like a fascinating thing too. Yeah. But essentially the shifting conception and where the essence of madness is sort of the basis of the shifting of conception, because he talks about the tying of madness to water and the sea and the void and things like that, the tying of madness to sort of either secret truths or truths that are sort of supposed to be hidden, like tying it to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil from the Garden of Eden as being the center mast of the ship of fools.
Yeah, well, and I hear what you're saying, how they were still sort of sequestering, and I think this is something I was having a hard time understanding, but I just felt like he kept sort of harping on this, like, the fool perceives wisdom in its whole, the man of reason perceives wisdom in fragments, and so, and there was this sort of, I mean, that I completely understood is like,
I mean, that's actually what we've been talking about for forever. Well, that's reductionism. That's my turtles all the way down idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is it is the way that you could say that we've sort of accomplished so much scientifically and everything in the last 600 years in the West has been through this reductionist sort of standard of just slowly breaking everything down and categorizing everything. And it's like, but I agree. it was more of embracing, but like even the ship of fools, the reason I sort of think that you're right, it's like they were sequestering them as in they pushed them out of like the village, but they were allowed to roam is sort of the point I think he was making, is why I still sort of, you're right, it's not sequestered, but it's like, sequestered isn't a good word, but they are being, they are allowed to roam. Yeah. Oh, I don't think I said sequester for pre.
I don't know.
You said that. Yeah. Actually, I'm confusing. You said that you still feel like they're sequestering, whereas I think he wasn't saying that, actually. I feel like
it's not sequestering, but the separation. Although I think he does say a few times, there seems to be a few contradictions in here where it seems... Well, it seems like he's saying that they're not sequestering them, and then he'll make a statement like, but there were hospitals that had beds for mad people or something like that.
Right. And that's, I mean, and I give him a little bit of break on that because I do feel like history, everything's gradation. So it's like there's going to obviously be some places in Europe that had like asylum-like things even before that. What did he do? 1674, the hospital general, and because he had like two dates. Oh, damn it! 1567. Can you still hear me? Is the mic's good. Okay. So 1567 as the creation of that. Two events that signify when reason and madness modified their language. And so the modifying their language was, I think, this idea that, like, you used to sort of, you weren't trying to silence the mad person. You were just, like, letting him roam and be wild,
essentially. Get out of here.
Yeah, just
Well, because there was also the kind of poetic tie of madness to nature, the secret truths of the earth, right?
Right.
They send him out to a farm like your rabbit when you were a child that your parents sent off to a farm.
Well, and it is kind of funny because it was making me think how I almost do, like, we have all these homeless issues these days, right? It's just a lot of homeless people. And I have always sort of been like, maybe we should just like sequester a part of like, and just like have it. Did you ever play RuneScape?
No, I did see Escape from New York and Escape from LA though.
Oh no. Well, you had in RuneScape, you had a place called the Wilderness, and it was just like this sort of place outside of civilization where like you could go, but just beware. There's no laws around here, and you used to kind of have that
outside of Austin. Feels like that.
Oh yeah. So that's I guess my point is it seems like people are doing that anyway. And it's like, maybe we should just, like, carve out a place. And it sounds crazy, but it's also like, well, in some sense, I am like, if you want to go and live wild, fine, go do it away from me.
Right.
and then maybe you'll appreciate all the luxuries of civilization more when you realize, like, oh, yeah, this kind of sucks, and I'm always kind of having to be on guard, and I hate sleeping in the rain and stuff, whatever. No, anyway. But it was making me think that is, like, there is something to be, like, in modern times, you really have no choice but to be in society. And I do think that is sort of one issue that is sort of causing a lot of
well, because what do you do with mad people in that situation?
Exactly. Yeah, you sequester them.
Right. So some thoughts that I had that I thought would be good for us to talk about, because he talks about madness a lot, and then he uses the word disorder towards the end of the chapter, which I find to be a really interesting word, because I hear it a lot in medical and psychological terminology, things like disordered thinking and stuff like that. Mental disorders, physical disorders. Right. Disorder is a really interesting idea to me. Like as a narrative.
Of course it is. As an anarchist.
Yeah, right. Anyway, so what is he talking? Because he doesn't really define madness in a very direct way. He talks about different conceptions of madness. Whoa.
Yeah, no, that is true. I do think the reason he used disordered is getting at that idea of like rationality is trying to add an order to the disorganized chaos of nature. And so it is that idea that you don't have that, like, especially in the example you brought up of like disordered thought, which you might see in somebody who presents with schizophrenia. And basically they'll like be on one topic and then they'll jump to just a completely different topic, and you'll just be like, how did you get there?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no logic. There is some logic in a sense, like their brains are associating these two concepts in a way like we don't understand.
Right.
But for the rational person, it doesn't. That's how I define it. It's like A plus B equals C is sort of an ordered thought,
right.
I guess.
Sure.
Yeah. Or 2 plus 2 equals 5, I should say, right?
Right. Very, very ordered. I guess it's ordered in a way.
Well, yeah. It's a good Radiohead song.
Right.
Okay. But yeah, I don't know. And I do agree with you is that he didn't come out and sort of define madness. I had a couple quotes, though, where I felt like he was describing him. I can try to find them if you want to. If you have any thoughts, too.
Okay.
While I do that.
Okay. Sure. Well, I mean, I think that madness is probably a difficult idea to define, and that's probably why he's talking about how it's associated rather than giving a direct definition. So something associated with hidden truths or forbidden truths, or something associated with death was a big one.
Yes, so I have, whenever you're, sorry. I have.
Well, because actually the whole time I'm thinking of, when he's talking about death, I think about apocalyptic Christians who are always talking about the end of times. And Alex Jones is constantly coming up in my mind while I'm reading this. And like how he fits into these conceptions. Because I feel like a lot of the modern conspiracy theory movements are kind of apocalyptic.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have. So he's essentially defining madness as the ability to endlessly contemplate death, which I think is an interesting idea. And then so I have this quote, and where once man's madness had been not to see death's term was approaching, so that it was necessary to recall him to wisdom with the spectacle of death. Now wisdom consisted of denouncing madness everywhere, teaching men that they were no more than dead men already, and that if the end was near, it was to the degree that madness, become universal, would be one and the same with death itself. So I don't really know what that means. So basically, yeah, I know. He's trying to say madness was a kind of death is sort of what I thought. But, like, yeah, it's like...
Here, what page is this on for you?
It's 52.
We have different pages.
You have the book. Yeah, it's I don't know.
Okay, what number is it near?
7. I think it's like it must be 17.
Okay,
or something. Because the next thing I talk about is or probably like 16. I don't know.
16.
Well, I don't have the exact thing, but I did take that.
Okay.
Anyway, while you're looking for that, I can sort of talk about stuff though, because then he talks about like the Grillos, which I thought was interesting, and he goes off on this sort of. I mean, this is where he got really sort of hard for me to follow when he was talking about all these painters that I didn't know any of these people. Like
that was the coolest part to me
Bosch.
though. Like reading it was cool. So like. I don't know. Something about it is like exciting.
It was cool.
It made me think of Hellraiser or Hellbound Heart. Did you ever read that? But that's another story that deals with madness, as in the seeking of a desire. Because that's another thing he talks about madness being tied to the seeking of desire. So the story in Hellraiser is that there's this little puzzle box. And if you can solve the puzzle box, that unlocks ultimate pleasure. The most pleasurable experience, like, you can't even imagine it. And what actually ends up happening is it unlocks the realm of this world of these non-human beings who see pleasure and pain as being two sides of the same coin. Mm-hmm. And so you can get to ultimate pleasure through ultimate like carnal torture, like tearing your skin off and stuff like that. And that is the same thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, interestingly, when I was reading about his Wikipedia, he was into sadomasochism.
Right,
so,
right, right.
So, yeah.
Well, it makes right. I think it's very tied. But so I think this is where I feel like the chapter, it's talking about different ways of conceptualizing where madness lies and where it comes from. So, yeah, obsession with death, obsession with desire. The one I keep bringing up, the kind of tie to the secret truths of the earth or the universe. What are some of the other ones?
Sorry, I was reading my notes.
Nice. It's a hard one. This is. I think it's the hardest thing we've read.
I think so too. Yeah. And you know, like we were saying about, you know, the painting part. It's like I spent a long time just on like 3 pages because it's like I would read something and I'd be like, who is Hieronymus Bosch? And then I would go look up that, you know, what he was talking about, the triptych of temptation of Saint Anthony. Yeah. You know, which is this. He spent like a good deal of time just talking.
The temptation one. Yep.
Yeah, talking about this painting and sort of the symbolism behind
impossible animals.
Right. And yeah, so I did sort of feel like he did keep coming back to this idea, though. We say that he had a lot of sort of conceptions of madness, sure, but I did feel like he kept coming back to this idea of it being tied to death. And I did sort of think of it as like, because I've thought about this with consciousness as I you know, have this whole, it's not my theory, but this is sort of just how I think about it, that your consciousness is a spectrum, and actually consciousness is the ultimate anxiety that we have is a fear of death, because it's like consciousness developed essentially to prevent us from dying, because it was this great planning capability to allow us to survive in the wilderness, and then it's just sort of blossomed and maybe even exploded, some might say, into this monstrosity that we have now. So, but all that came from just being able to project into the future and past out of the present. And so when he was talking about this, it was making me think about a lot of the similar things I've had, where it almost felt like he was saying, you know, in that quote that I was saying, now wisdom consisted of denouncing madness everywhere, teaching men that they were no more than dead already, and necessary to recall him to wisdom with the spectacle of death. So it's like, it's making them aware of death. Like, the more rational you are and the more you lean into consciousness, you could say, which I would say is that rational thing. Like, I think consciousness is the rationality that we have. Then you're going to sort of, constantly be thinking about death. Whereas maybe in the mad people, they're not, I don't know. He says, I don't know. See, this is where, though, then he also says that madness has not been, and where once man's madness had been not to see that death's term was approaching. See, that's where I feel like he's saying quote, mad people, or, you know, whatever you want to call them, whatever the politically correct way to say it would be, we're using his words, is that they are not thinking about death, and they're not sort of hyper aware of it, and they're not, and in some ways maybe that they're happier. I don't know.
I think an important
he didn't get
bit
into
about
that.
it, though,
was me.
I think part of the reason he doesn't define it in one way, because like the death thing is sort of a definition, but I think he's tying that to a specific era too. Well,
yeah, before the 15th century.
Right. I think his point is also that where madness lies changes over time.
Yes.
So madness isn't one thing.
Right, which is the whole social construct thing, I suppose, right? Yeah. Right. I agree with that, yeah. So, yes. Yeah. 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 I'll let you take the wheel for a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit tricky to figure out where to go, because we could talk about it on the broad scale and try and relate it to now, because it's so hard. Like that same thing you were talking about the temptations and all that. It's I guess I'm more interested in his writing and where he's coming from as a historian, just because it's so different than the other histories that we've read.
Yeah. Well, so I don't know if you saw, but I was like, okay, let me get ChatGPT's help on this.
Oh,
so,
yeah. We should bring that into it. Bring an AI into it.
Because I was like, all right, ChatGPT, can you explain the connection Foucault is making between death and madness in the beginning of his book?
Yeah.
And you know, I should say, ChatGPT, sort of talks about, Foucault argues that in classical age, the experience of madness was intimately linked with the notion of death. Madness was often considered a form of moral and social corruption, and it was associated with death in various ways. And then it sort of has like 4 different types of death. Social death, which is people deemed mad, were often excluded from mainstream society. Symbolic death. Foucault also explores how madness was considered a form of otherness. And then death of reason. The classical age emphasized the importance of reason and rationality as a defining characteristic of humanity. And death as a remedy. In some cases, you know, death was considered a possible cure, right? So this was all after. And I do, you know, and I think this does get to the idea of before that, it was like mad people were allowed to sort of be wild. They were one with nature, and there wasn't this attempt to control and institutionalize and stuff like that. I mean, that sort of getting back to what I guess my opening statement is that I did feel like that was sort of the fundamental point being made. Not a prescription. I agree with you. I wasn't trying to say that he was trying to prescribe anything in this first part.
Right.
Is more of just, it's just looking at the historical change over time.
I think good job, ChatGPT. That was
it's
pretty
amazing.
Okay.
I think so. I mean, who knows?
Well, I've heard it do a lot worse and make stuff up that's
for all we know, it could have just made that up too. I mean, you know.
But it seems about right.
Yeah.
I think So if you don't have anything,
with a grain of salt, listeners. Sorry.
I think there's some specifics that are kind of interesting throughout. So I feel like that's the main point. But if we go back to the leper stuff, that was kind of interesting. The leper colony.
I agree. Yeah.
What I think is most interesting about it, that also ties to madness, and not just madness, but sort of all forms of sickness and healing, is the religious content of society's relationship to it. And when they were talking about how being stricken with leprosy is in and of itself a form of is a gift from God, right? Because God is giving you the gift of punishing you for your iniquities.
Right.
Which is...
Yeah.
I mean, that's wild, but actually, it's kind of like what the guy I was talking to last night. I mean, that's kind of his perspective on things.
Yeah. Well, it is a nice... I mean, it's not nice. It's not. That's not the right...
Warms your heart, right?
No. I was saying what I meant to... Or, you know, if I had finished the thought, what I was saying is it's a nice way of sort of dealing with the madness of reality, of being like, all right, I'm being punished for this, and I just have to sort of take it or whatever, you know?
Right.
You know, it's just obviously, it's just a way that people sort of, deal with reality.
Right.
And I do think that at some stage in everybody's life, we all do come to that realization if we live long enough, where we just are like, okay, I can't really control, I'm trying to control all this stuff, and I just can't, and let me just, you know, whether you chalk it up to God or just stochasticism, you know, it's just like, you know, randomness. But I do think that we all do sort of get there, which is interesting. I don't know. But it's interesting what you were saying about the apocalyptic part, because that was sort of, because I get the impression that you were saying basically mad people are associated with apocalyptic thinking a lot. And I do sort of see that, but then that sort of goes against what that Foucault quote.
I mean, I think all of the associations that he makes are associations we still have.
Yeah,
I think the idea of the sea is, we don't use the sea so much anymore specifically, but I don't think we have a whole lot of relationship in the modern world with the sea in that way. Yeah. But with space, I mean, think about space movies. Everybody goes crazy in space. The idea of the void, and like going back to Alex Jones, and there's the quote, if you stare into the void too long, the void stares back into you. And he talks about how he thinks that he stared too long into the void. He's probably right.
He might be right. I didn't know that. Yeah, dude. Well, that's very self-aware of him.
Right.
Say what you will. That's funny. Yeah.
But I think that association's that like it feels true to me. It feels like that statement has some deep wisdom in it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think so. Well, and so I do sort of have a whole rant to make. I don't know if you want me to make it now, having to do with some of the lineage of this thinking.
Okay.
Which so when I was reading more about just the background of Foucault and stuff, it was, again, this is all from Wikipedia. It was mentioning that one very important writing that he read at like when he was in his early 20s that seemed to have influenced him a lot was Nietzsche, and specifically I think it was, what was it? It was his Meditations. I can't remember what the first word was. God, it's gonna meditation. It's fine. Untimely Meditations. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I actually haven't read them, so I'm meaning to read those now. Because I've only done, whatever, the Will to Power and stuff like that, or whatever it is. Yeah. And thus said Zarathustra or whatever. Yeah. But that. I was just reading the synopsis of that before because I didn't have time to obviously read the whole thing. And it's 4 letters, and one of them is sort of Nietzsche's getting at, he's talking about the history of life and that it's impossible to have an objective concept of humans because human experience is subjective. And how also there's like no real history of humans because we change from moment to moment and stuff. I need to sort of go into all this a little bit more, but this is essentially what Hume was saying. All of this is sort of going back to David Hume. David Hume was saying a lot of this in the 18th century, and of course is very influential philosophically. I mean, I'm sure Nietzsche read him and Foucault, and this was something I always had an issue with Hume. Actually, he was sort of the first one to articulate this idea. I think of that. There's no experience is basically, because he's an empiricist, and the idea that experience is the only way to get truth, but all of your experience is subjective because I can't say what your conception of color is. So this is what I also thought was really interesting, because all of these guys keep going back to vision too, which I think makes sense, because vision is the way that we sort of take in the empiricist sense. This is, we sort of translate a lot of our scientific information into vision or thereabouts. Yeah. I mean, into whatever it is, a graph or, a spectrogram or whatever it is, it's a visual thing. And I just think this makes sense that we would, when we're trying to talk about everything philosophically, we ultimately get back to the sensations because it is all built upon that. And this is where I don't have a good argument, but I disagree that there is no objective truth, and I think But this is where I think Foucault and like potentially Nietzsche and Hume would disagree with us,
right?
And maybe that means we're positivists. I guess I don't know.
I think that there's different ways and there's different places you can put objective truth, and I think that. Even reading Foucault, you can see that there's sort of no bottom. And that's what we're talking about. What is his definition of madness? And it sort of shifts and stuff like that. There isn't really a substrate. It's kind of all shifty. It's part of probably why it's sort of hard to understand, because he's not building on much of a foundation. Like he's speaking in language, right? So we can kind of understand him. And unfortunately, it's in translation. I mean, I assume you've been reading yours in French, but
obviously. Est-ce que je peux aller au W?
Okay.
Je m'appelle.
Nice.
Dang it! I gotta bleep that. I gotta bleep that. Okay. Okay. All right. Anyway,
okay. Remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Anyway,
what were you saying? Yeah,
I don't know. Different places to put objective truth. So I don't know. I don't know what Hume or Nietzsche say about objective truth. I'm not really a big Hume guy, but I think that like something Mises and the whole libertarian school write about is that the Keynesians have it all wrong with economics. There's no such thing as objective value, and I agree with that. The value is subjective. Not like a pen doesn't have any objective value. It only has the whatever value I want or any individual puts on it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true of any product or anything. And so I think that's true. However, I do think that there is such a thing as objective reality, and I just don't exactly know how to access it or how to prove that you can access it.
Right.
So like you and I seem to believe that each other exists.
Right.
And that's and I think that to be true, and I don't have a way to prove it, I guess.
Right. Well, and so I should qualify. I don't know if Nietzsche and Hume would believe that there's no objective truth. That's just sort of what I inferred from reading some of their arguments, but I'm not an expert on this, so I just want to qualify that. It does seem that's what Foucault thinks. I think
so. Yeah. I believe so.
And yeah, I mean, it's just I actually want to sort of work this out, but I just feel like, so I was thinking about this, and we come back to this idea of like what is truth, and I still sort of feel that it is reproducibility in a sense, or something that you can steadily say, like, why that this wall is gray or whatever, because every time I look at it, it is gray. Right. And then if somebody else looks at it, they're also like, yeah, that's gray.
Right.
And even
gray is hard though, because the perception is a very hard thing to deal with truth.
Well, color. Right. Yes. I mean, this is why I think it was interesting that Nietzsche was working with Goethe on a theory of color, apparently, which I didn't know anything about. And then Hume, a lot of what his work was doing was on the back of Berkeley, who did this big treatise on vision, and Newton, who did a whole treatise on vision. And because they were getting at that exact thing of like, especially there is a variance of what some people say is blue and red and stuff like that. However, and I was just laughing because you do very, you're very, very good at doing the pauses, However, anyway, I think that it comes down to like truth is almost probabilistic. It's like most people agree that this is gray, and that's why we call it gray. Even though, of course, there's going to be variation in that. There is some kind of distribution where most people lie in the center and say this is gray. And so I was thinking about sort of two ways that I think our minds rather, try to distinguish what truth is. And I'm just calling it again right now temporal and spatial, just very rudimentarily. Maybe I'll change it in a second. And I'm sure somebody's thought about this already, but this is just what it was making me think about, is that the temporal is basically the idea that we can come back to this wall ourselves multiple times and it'll still be gray. And so that's a little bit of reproducibility in the temporal space, right? We can come back in an hour and it's still gray. And we're like, okay, though it must be gray. Then there's the spatial truth, which is that we can ask a bunch of different people and get their opinion. And then we sort of combine that to find what truth is.
Right. Is that why you wore a gray shirt today, too?
Yes.
To really bring the point home?
Yes. But this, and I haven't reconciled this yet, but this is where I think it gets tricky, because there is something to be said then that you do need other people to establish truth. Because yes, you can.
I don't think that's always true.
No. But I guess what I'm saying is that is something that I think hits at home with a lot of these people that try to say that truth is only with your truth is the only truth. This is where I think we get this sort of conflict, because actually, if you think about how we determine our truth, we do it with other people, I think. Right. Yeah. Anyway,
I think that there's a mix-up in what it's a little bit like what I was saying before, because I agree with what you're saying about I think that the temporal and the spatial, that's a good way of setting aside different ways of gaining confidence in the reality of something.
Right.
I think that there are things that are narratives that we can strip out from that. Gray is just a word that we use to describe a certain experience.
Sure.
Right? Like, it isn't gray. That the grayness isn't the truth in it. It's that's just the sound that we associate with that experience. The experience is the trueness of it. Right? And so that...
Well,
like,
yeah,
it's not called gray by God. It's called gray by people who speak English.
No. Yeah, it's the experience, and then we have a
way
of... Yeah, we label it, exactly.
Yeah. Right. There are things, though, like it being cold outside. Whether or not anybody agrees, you will freeze to death. And so that's where there's sort of like you're butting up against something that is much closer to an objective reality. If it's -30 out, and there's some weirdo from Wisconsin who's wearing shorts who's like, it's not cold. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you call that. You're gonna die if you don't take the right precautions.
Right. Sure. Yeah. But that's where I would say that's why I was getting back to this idea that it takes.
Right. But you don't need anybody else even to confirm that. You can just die. You don't need to ask anybody.
That's true. Yeah, that's
you
true.
don't need to ask anyone if you can breathe underwater. You'll find out.
Right. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is I actually don't think... I think that asking other people can help you to build your own confidence, but that's not where the truth lies.
Right.
That's a good way of helping you to access what might or might not be true. But it's true whether or not... If everybody else told you that you could breathe underwater, that doesn't make it any more true.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, that's a very good point. And like I said, I got to sort of still hash this out because, I would agree. That's a very good point of how there is an objective truth beyond yourself.
There isn't a good way to prove that because there is also like postmodern argumentation against even the narrative of death. And then at a certain point,
because like once you die, you're not, you could say truth doesn't even exist anymore in some sense.
Right. But it's not even just the postmodernists. There's some like the Christian theology suggests that there is such a thing as non-death. And actually a lot of them. Heaven, but actually if you press Christian theologists about it, they're a little bit, it's a little bit more poetic than that. Like there's the basic idea, like there's gates and you walk in and there's like streets and you have a new house and you get to see your grandma and stuff.
Well, so this is getting at another...
But then there's the other idea that what heaven means is the perpetual existence with God, and it is the conquering of death. That is what heaven is. And everybody can conquer death.
Yeah.
And that what death means...
Yeah.
Like, death and hell are the same thing. They're synonymous because death means separation from God. Non-death, when you're alive, you're with God.
Right.
Which feels to me very Foucault narrative-y, you know?
Yeah. Well, and this was getting me to wonder also another thing is, does this ultimately get back to that maybe very fundamental question where you're going to maybe think that all truth is subjective if you're an atheist, and if you think that there's an objective truth, does that essentially mean that you're saying that there is a God? Yeah,
that's what Rose Wilder Lane says.
I don't know who that is.
Did we talk about this? Laura Ingalls Wilder. Did you ever read Little House in the Big Woods or anything like that growing up?
Little House on the Prairie.
That one too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's got a whole series. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, I forgot.
So her daughter was like a proto-libertarian. Hilarious figure. Like, very cool. Met Mises.
Met Mises?
Met Mises and was like a huge fan, and then got really mad because she thought that Mises believed that a state could be useful for things, and was like, I'm sorry, but I can't associate with socialists.
So we're talking. Oh, excuse me. We're talking like end of 19th century, right? Early 20th.
Early 20th. I think we might even be talking about like the 30s and 40s.
Okay.
Yeah. That whole crowd is hilarious. Like, there's a story of Ayn Rand throwing a plate at Murray Rothbard.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, for being a socialist. Like, they're all like upset with each other for being socialists.
Yeah.
It's like these people couldn't be further from socialists.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Rose Wilder Lane writes about the belief in God and how any action is a belief in God, because what we have is we have free will as humans, and so acting is embracing the gift we've been given by God or the universe. However you conceptualize it, if you are choosing things, you are displaying your belief in God. Whether you say you're an atheist or whatever.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think I agree with that. Or I think I agree that, yeah, it always seems to come back to that, rather.
Right.
and yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah.
And like Ayn Rand was so against that because she was like staunchly atheist, but an objectivist. And so Rose Wilder Lane's argument is, where are you saying objectivity comes from? Like, what is the placement of objectivity, if not God and or the totality of the universe or something?
Right. Yeah, because, I mean, yeah. I'm still trying to think. So, because, like, could it be also that I'm trying to go back to, because I'm just trying to think about my theory, of course, because I'm an egoist. And with the idea of how do we determine truth, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I'm sort of going back to. And how do we determine objective truth? I think I'm going to have to think about this, but I think you're always very good at this, Antushka, of just you come up with very good alternatives. I'm like, I'm trying to reconcile the idea that, it's like whether or not you think it's cold and you go out in whatever, -20 for long enough time, you will freeze to death. Yeah. And you can do all the incantations that you want, and you can do all the meditations that you want.
And you can say it's a narrative.
You can say whatever it is, but the end result is that. And, which is kind of nature in a way. It's like, is nature the ultimate truth, right?
Well, that's like saying God is the ultimate. It's the same thing, right? It's the same statement. You don't determine truth, God does. Nature does. Yeah.
Right. However, again, it's like death is an interesting... I mean, this is maybe where you could rationalize yourself out of it. Because, like, death is like a different... It's not reproducible. It only happens once. So that sort of gets away from the idea of truth in the way I was defining it. I'm not saying it's right. Mm-hmm. So, I'm going to have to think about this. This is very, very good.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to define truth.
Well, you don't know, but I feel like I don't know what your definition is. If you had to try, how would you try?
Truth is, I would say truth is not determined by us. Mm-hmm. Truth is determined by God, the universe, nature, whatever. And I don't mean Jesus God. I mean like some totality that I don't understand.
Sure.
And that and I believe that exists. I believe that there is an existence outside of each of us that is objective, in a sense. Mm-hmm. And then I think that we access it, or we try to access it as best we can through a variety of ways. Like what our bodies can touch. Our experience is our first way of accessing it. Our understanding of others, our consciousness, is another way of accessing it. Mm-hmm. And then our action is another way of accessing it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I like that. And sort of trying to think back to Foucault.
Right. That guy. Forgot about him.
No, I think I agree with that, though. And maybe that, because, like, honestly, that is kind of what I'm saying, though, is that we try to access it by what we can. I don't know.
I mean, I think that where I would say that there is no objective truth, there are spaces where there is no such thing as objective truth, and those would be narratives created by us.
Right.
So madness is not something where there's an objective truth. Madness is a definition, and to me that's plainly obvious. Not that there aren't people that need help. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that what is and isn't madness that's just our perception.
Right. No, and I mean, you can think about how, quote, mad people are also accessing some kind of deep truth about reality from examples of, like, Nash, right? Nash equilibrium, from,
sure.
If you've familiar with the Hollywood, like, Beautiful Mind, right? Great movie. That's, he had schizophrenia, but he was an amazing mathematician. So despite this, he was sort of accessing something, even though we didn't understand all the other things.
Right.
And, and then you could ask this question of, like, you read some of these scriptures in whatever religion, and you hear about just phantasms or whatever, just people talking to you, and you're like, well, this sounds kind of like schizophrenia in a different context. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And yet we have built many religions off of sort of messiahs like that. Mm-hmm. So it is true. We used to have a different appreciation for that, and I don't know. I mean, because also when I was reading Foucault and he was talking about how, like, you just, like, he was talking about one, like, sort of dude that would just walk around naked in society, and it's like, but there is something to be said about, like, maybe you want to, it just comes into this question. As soon as we create a society, we all, I think, take a pact that we're going to have some impingement on our freedom. That's sort of the implicit pact you take. I know you hate this, but let me just get it out. But it is this idea that, like, it's just conscientiousness, right? And again, and this is I think the reason that we have sequestered mad people, because they don't do the pact. They're not conscientious, dang it. No, I'm just kidding. Some of them are very conscientious. Yeah. This is the thing, is it just depends on the person and what if we want to call it a malady, right? Maybe Foucault doesn't. But there do seem to be reasons that we did this, though, too. Especially, I was just reading a story about a woman in Idaho that, like, killed her kids because she thought they were possessed by the devil, right? Right. So, then you have examples like that where it's like, okay, we could just let her run wild, but then what happens, it's always this question between chaos and order. Sure. And it's like, I get why.
Isn't that a Jordan Peterson book or something?
Oh, God. Is it? This is like when I realized I was a libertarian.
You got to talk more like Kermit.
I can't even. I'm not even going to try. God. But in a sense,
no, I think it's a good point. I was just giving you a hard time.
Society is order, and the wilderness is chaos, or whatever.
Sure.
You say.
Yeah.
Is that what he says?
Probably. That sounds like something he'd say.
Yeah. And you got to go fight the dragon too at that.
Yeah. Right. He'd be like, "Look, man, chaos is attractive."
Yeah. But I don't know if this is coherent. I was just trying.
It is coherent, I think.
I jumped into this idea that I was having when reading Foucault of just to get off of the objective truth, because I think it's tough. But I think we sort of agree a little bit.
I think we figured it out.
I think we figured it out.
Yeah.
And
if anyone wants to know what objective truth is, go back and listen. You got it.
Yeah, you got it. And then go back and listen to me try to explain combustion.
Oh, I looked that up. I did figure out combustion.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just put a pin in this. All I'm saying is that it does seem. Do you probably agree with this, or maybe you don't, as an anarchist, that there there are times when you have to. I mean, how do you deal with somebody that's
You mean there's
murderous?
There's an active shooter. You got to shoot him.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. So that's how you do it.
No.
Okay.
I'm not saying that you have to do that with this woman. I'm not. I don't know. I think that I am extremely leery of institutions in general, institutional punishment and institutional rehabilitation. That doesn't mean that I don't understand the reason for it in all cases.
Right. Yeah, and it's just tough because it's hard for us to say now how much more civil we were when we were in whatever hunter-gatherer societies and whatnot.
Right.
Because it does also feel like it's just the problem with institutions is the fact that you get away from the local level, and really it's just what these questions require is very specific answers because they're all...
And the thing like you're talking about, I don't think there is a good answer, really. What do you do with somebody like that? I don't know is the answer.
Yeah. Well, and this is where
that's my answer. I mean,
well, and this is where it's like, it's the social pact question. Is there is something to be said about how if you want to live in society with people, there is a degree that you. I think, of conscientiousness you have to have. And if you don't have it, then it makes sense to me. Then, it's okay. Then just, you can't be in this part. But we're not going. So, and then this gets back to my initial point of like, I am kind of for the idea that we have just a wilderness where people that want to go live there can go live there. And yes, God forbid, there's probably going to be crazy stuff that happens. But it's like, you've sort of taken, at least
it's like voluntary. Australia, right? It's like a penal colony, essentially.
Basically, I'm just, essentially just apparently.
Apparently, I'm for penal colony.
Yeah.
Little did I know.
Not even a penal colony, though, I guess.
No.
Because it's not. I'm not saying you put people there that have done wrong. I'm hopefully it's a
It's
voluntary
mostly just
thing.
really annoying people.
Yes, it's before they do something wrong. You're like, okay, dude,
go do something wrong over there to them.
Go do something wrong over there. Exactly. And then they create but this is the problem. Then they create a coalition, and then you have barbarians at the gate.
You're like, dang it.
Yes. Okay. So anyway. Okay. So, did you want to talk about combustion again?
I mean, I just mean that I figured it out.
Nice.
I figured out what my confusion was. With
yeah. No. Because again, I do apologize. I feel like
like flame or like heat and light can be expelled with a variety of
chemical reactions.
Chemical reactions, exactly. Yeah. Some of them can include oxygen and are not combustion. Combustion has to be with hydrocarbons. So oxygen reacting with hydrocarbons so that you wind up with CO2 and H2O as a byproduct.
See, I still wonder, though, if that is that... I thought the most general explanation was just an exothermic reaction with a redox reaction, where you have an oxidant and a reductant, and there's heat produced.
Oxidation or oxidization is an umbrella, like you were saying, is an umbrella.
Yeah, exactly.
And then combustion is a specific type, and maybe I'm wrong, but I was reading it's a specific type that has to do with hydrocarbons.
Okay. Yeah, I could believe that.
And maybe the different people use it differently.
Yeah. All right,
so if you light like copper on fire in a vacuum, that's not combustion.
Okay. But I was correct to say, that oxidative phosphorylation, which is what we do when we breathe, is combustion. Because
Yep.
Okay, cool. Well, that's all I care about. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm still remembering something.
Tons of things. Like, so much stuff is combustion that you don't think is combustion.
Yeah.
Because it's not all, like, explosions everywhere.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's just hydrocarbons. Yeah, but that makes sense because, like, basically all of the fuels that we use are hydrocarbons. I mean, this is... Right. Yeah. So, okay. Interesting.
I forgot about that confusion. I love your question. Why don't you understand this?
Well, but you could see I wasn't doing a good job explaining.
No. It's great. Yeah. No, I have that. My wife was like vindicated because she's like, because I always say that I don't have these problems with other people. And she's like, "Oh, you obviously
really?
do."
Oh, that's funny. Did she listen, or did you just tell her about it?
I just told her, but she was the one who helped me with the hydrocarbons thing.
Nice. Yeah, that's funny. It's funny. Yeah, and I told you my brother's been listening, so nice. I'd like to get him on the podcast sometime. Brother
was he like, how does he not understand this?
No. I'm sure everybody was like, calm down. I was getting more frustrated with myself, honestly.
No, it's great. I just wish I could, like, how do you not understand that? I feel like if you could answer that, you know the answer to the problem.
I know. It's more of frustration that I was so incoherent, and I think, again, not really.
I don't think you were incoherent. Like what you were saying, the umbrella with the oxidization and combustion as a subset. That makes sense, and it seems to be true. So
okay, cool, yeah. Cool. All right. Well,
all right. So what do we do next? Do you want to just do the next one, the institutionalization?
I figured we just ride this one out. I mean, honestly, we could probably. How much left? I mean, you have the book, the written book. How much? Because I feel like we did like 50 pages, right?
Yeah.
This last time. I mean, and it's probably like 150. So should we just do the next third?
My copy's 300, so we did 50 out of 300.
Okay. Well, yeah, we won't do the whole thing then.
But also, I don't think I can do that in 2 weeks with the my schedule.
I got you.
But yeah, the next chapter is the Great Confinement.
Yeah.
Compel intrare.
Let me go. Keep dropping the mic. Let me go back to the contents. Yeah, good radio. The Great Confinement. Okay. The Insane Passion and Delirium. Yeah. Madness and Civilization, because we probably should get to that at some point. I guess, should we do...
We could do Madness and Civilization next.
Yeah. So, I almost want to, like, skip around in this, because there's a lot of good things, like Doctors and Patients would be interesting.
Yeah.
The Birth of Asylum, I think we should probably get to that.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Okay. I don't know if we want to do, like, Insane... Doctors and Patients, and The Birth of Asylum.
Do we want to do 4? Do we want to change the format of the whole show?
No. I'm saying, that we can do too. But I'm saying for next week, if we jump around in this and do The Insane, up until Passion and Delirium, and then jump to Doctors and Patients, and then jump to The Birth of Asylum.
Yeah, but not all for next week.
I thought these were just little sections.
Well, they're like 30-plus page sections.
Oh, well, God. Antushka. Okay, you tell me what you want to do.
Okay. Why don't we do, let's see, because The Insane is page 65 to 85.
Right.
So that's 20, and then Doctors and Patients is 159 to 199.
Yeah. Okay, you want to do that?
Those two?
Yeah.
We can do those two. I'm almost certain I won't get through all of that. But
that's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Let's do those two.
Yeah.
The Insane and Doctors and Patients. Cool.
Yeah. And I did think, it really is interesting how... I wonder why he wrote it like this, too. Because it actually was making me think it's like he's trying to write it like... well, I don't know. I was going to say Plato, but then...
Oh.
Even, well, not really, because it's not a dialogue, but with like the different sort of numbers, I guess. Right. I don't know what he was trying to.
The first thing it reminds me of, honestly, is the Unabomber Manifesto. That's how it's written as a series of it's 99 theses.
Well, yes. So and so that's kind of what I was getting at is like
Martin Luther.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and David Hartley. His observations on man, his frame, and his expectations is kind of like this, too. Yeah. Although it is what the weird thing is, even though that was written 200 years before this, I felt like it was still a little bit better organized. Because I don't know if you noticed, but and is this the postmodern sort of thing where it's like he would start a new section, but it wouldn't be capitalized?
Mid-sentence? Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
There's also a lot of typos.
Yeah.
But that's also probably the translate. I mean, that it's not the best copy.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it's the most popular, which is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know where the postmodernism is and where it's just mistakes. It's hard to say. That's always the case. That's true in music, too.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, I do think this is good. This is a good pick. It's almost making me wonder if we should go to Nietzsche after this.
Sure. Does he do a history one?
Well, so I was going to say, his whole, I mean, that is where I can completely see Nietzsche's influence on Foucault. Because, Nietzsche is very much about sort of understanding philosophy through history.
Sure. Because I feel like I'm liking this history thing, at least for a while. Nietzsche's all about history. And honestly, is also just because he's also writing about his modern day Germany, which, in the end of the 19th century, it's historical in that sense because he's being you're learning about what his take on the German people are, which is why he's so fascinating because, I mean, this is why he's aged so well, is because he basically called all the authoritarianism that came in the 30 years after his death, or whatever, maybe more, right? Uh-huh.
I mean, and it's interesting when I was saying whether or not he would agree on subjective truth, he's also he says things, but he doesn't believe them. He's just saying this is what people believe. So for all I know, without having read his meditations, he could have just been saying this is what everybody, it's like he's critiquing it by sort of summarizing it in a sense.
Sure.
Because that's a lot what he does. But I think he's also just very easy to read. That was one striking thing, is just he's very readable. Cool. Then I'd say we do Schopenhauer, but I don't know if we should do Schopenhauer.
We can do whatever. We can keep on going.
Schopenhauer's a little spicy, Antushka.
Well, I like that.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd like Schopenhauer, but
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, you might, because I mean, again, I think Foucault was also influenced by a lot of Schopenhauer.
Yes.
But maybe not. I shouldn't say that.
I think I remember that from something. I don't remember what.
Oh,
some class.
Okay. Oh. Yeah, so I mean, I was surprised. Sorry, we'll end soon. I know you got to go. But
it's okay.
I see you squirming. You're like, yeah.
Gotta go.
Yeah, but so your program was, I mean, it's interesting, sort of, but it also makes sense because you were in the, you did a humanities master's essentially. So you did a lot of postmodern sort of stuff.
Well, we had a class that we had to do called critical studies, which was it's more critical theory than postmodernism. But the professors there were very into postmodern academics,
right? And
they would always encourage us to work out our postmodern muscles so that we could communicate in that way.
That's interesting.
But I remember that talk. It was the weirdest thing. Like the professor was sitting and going like that. It's like, did they understand this? It's like it was literally like listening to a talk in a language that you don't speak.
You mean just so for people listening? So you were just nodding your head.
Right. Of course. I should have thought about that. Yeah. So it was a talk when I was in my master's. We talked about it earlier in the episode. But all the professors were listening to this talk, nodding as if they understood what was going on. And when I was listening to the talk, it sounded to me like utter nonsense. I didn't understand it at all, as if it could have been in a language that I didn't speak.
Yeah. And the critical theory is it's the idea of sort of looking at history with a critical lens of race and power and stuff like that.
Yeah, power at its core, because critical theory, like Marcuse and Adorno and stuff like that, pre-critical race theory is essentially it's the idea that there is only power, which comes out of postmodernism.
That's what I was going to say. Didn't that come from Foucault? And
yes, they draw a lot from Foucault, but I think where Foucault and they would differ is that the critical theorists like to cast things as sort of oppressor oppressed, and I think that Foucault would think that that's way too specific a narrative. Like, that is also a narrative.
Yeah.
And, he'll tear the whole bottom out of everything and be off into a black hole somewhere. And they're like, no, this is important to stick on the suppressor oppressed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Because, I mean, you could also say that almost Nietzsche was kind of talking about that. The will to power. I think that's what it's called.
I mean, I think power is an important conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, and, at some point we should maybe read some Plato, maybe at least his Republic, because
the whole thing.
Well, the beginning at least, it's all about sort of...
Justice, right?
Justice, exactly.
Isn't the first conversation justice?
Yeah, Socrates is essentially trying to show how this one guy who believes justice is the powerful.
Yes,
he's trying to show how that's wrong.
Right. Doesn't it come out that there is basically no meaning?
Yes, that's. I
remember that. Yeah,
I finished it, and I was like, he never told me what his opinion is.
Right. It's just it doesn't mean anything.
I just assumed that I was just being stupid, though.
No. I think essentially the takeaway that I took was that justice doesn't really have a meaning at its core.
Right, and so this is the interesting thing, and sort of we can wrap up here, but I mean, maybe we'll talk about. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about it more. Is going back to all this idea of like cold and color and everything. It is getting to this idea that we're talking about it with language, and language is a secondary. It's a secondary thing on top of the truth that we're trying to sort of establish in reality. Right. Language is a creation that we've made as humans to communicate to our best of our ability the reality that we perceive in some sense. But yeah, we'll talk about that more. Anyway.
Okay.
Anyway, man. Yeah, and, I'll be back home, so I'll have a good microphone again next week.
It sounds fine, I think.
Yeah, sure it does. You're just saying that.
That's really silly. No, it does sound fine.
You are. No, yeah. Well, thank you.
Shucks.
And, the last episode did pretty well. I mean, for
did
us.
It? Oh, I forgot to look. What did we get? Back up to 5 million?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, basically more or less.
Less, but not that much less.
It's all relative, right?
Just like a factor of 6 or something, or 10. or sorry, a factor of 5 million.
Or sorry. I always get that one wrong.
Yeah. These damn scientific notation, what are you going to do?
Right.
All right, cool. Well, all right, sounds good.
Cool.
See ya.
Bye.